The galaxy is a massive place, and there is a huge variety of things that you can do and see. And in almost every population center in the galaxy, you can hear the roar of some type of engine followed by the roar of a large crowd cheering on a race. Doesn't matter how poor or backwards the world is. As a matter of fact, the more desolate a planet is, the better the racing usually is. It's usually more exciting and dangerous. Today I want to take a look at why racing culture is so important in the Star Wars galaxy and why you can see it almost on every planet and every system. If you really think about it, the Boot Eve Classic is the event that really starts off the entire Skywalker saga. Without it, without Anakin stepping into that pod racer, it's possible that Padme, Qui-Gon, Anakin, none of them actually make it off the planet, and Darth Maul just kills everyone. The Boot Eve Classic was a pod race. Pod racers were essentially a small cockpit being pulled along by a pair of gigantic thrusters. It's like chariot racing or motorcycle chariot racing. Yes, that's an actual real thing. You should look it up. Except you have a lot more horsepower and are floating a few feet above the ground. In the dangerous world of Star Wars racing, pod racing is definitely one of the most dangerous types of racing you can get involved in. I think it's because, again, the engines are just held on by two cables to the cockpit you're in. It was so dangerous that by the New Republic era, they actually banned all pod racing. And so all you had left were swoop bikes and speeders, which are still pretty dangerous. And of course, you can also race starfighters. Now, pod racers came in all different shapes and sizes, and it seems like there was a complete lack of rules about what you could or couldn't use on your build. It was as unregulated as you would expect a major event on Tatooine would be. Now, there are many different angles to take when we're talking about racing culture. Racing does something different for every person who's involved, from the owners to the racers to the people watching in the stands. First, let's take a look at the owners. These are the people who basically are in charge of running these events. In the case of the Boot Eve Classic, it was more than just a race. You see, Tatooine was a remote outer rim world without much economic development or any major population centers. Never drew the attention of the core worlds of the Republic or even business interests looking to exploit the free trade zone. And that's probably because Tatooine didn't have that many useful natural resources. Tatooine was, however, close to Hutt space, and it was only one jump away from the Corellian Run, making Tatooine an ideal transport hub for whatever illicit goods the Hutts were trying to move towards the core, whether it be spice or slaves. And so the Hutts would quickly fill the power vacuum on the planet and establish smuggling operations in Mos Espa and also Mos Eisley. The Hutts were gangsters, and different clans and families would fight amongst each other for territory. They would use power, money, and influence as currency. The perception of how rich and powerful a Hutt gangster is very important. Having a huge household bodyguard complement is a great way of showing that you are untouchable, and it'll discourage all but the most powerful crime lords from messing with you. But if you want to win the respect of not only your enemies, but the entire city or the entire planet, you got to do something bigger, more grander, and more public, like a giant pod race. You see, the Hutt's rule on the planet was tenuous at best. A powerful lord like Jabba might have a retinue of a few dozen soldiers and attendants. This would make him one of the most powerful entities on this sparsely populated planet, but it was still hardly enough for him to maintain order and control of any territory. The Hutts were self-appointed rulers, and they basically got away with everything because there were no rulers or law enforcement outside of them on the planet to stop them from doing whatever they wanted. But if they started stepping on too many toes, stealing too much water from those hard-working moisture farmers, then someone might try to organize everyone and overthrow those gigantic alien slugs. Now, before the Clone Wars, before even the Phantom Menace, you had a Hutt named Garjula the Hutt who was ruling over Tatooine. She was actually very capable, but she had one major issue. She was a degenerate gambler. As a matter of fact, the Hutt used to own Anakin Skywalker and his mother, but lost both of them to Watto betting on pod racing. Garjula the Hutt's gambling habits were so bad that it threatened to bring down her entire criminal enterprise. In a last-ditch attempt to save her rule, she came up with an ambitious plan to rehabilitate the old Mos Espa circuit and build a massive new stadium that could accommodate up to 100,000 new viewers. This new race course was supposed to rival the best in the galaxy, like the ones you could find on Malastare or on Munilist. The entire project would require massive amounts of investment and capital, and so Garjula the Hutt would approach Higo Damas, the alter ego of the Sith Lord named Darth Plagueis. Higo Damas was a power broker and financial backer of many of the large business deals in the galaxy. He was also secretly plotting to overthrow the Republic and kill all of the Jedi. Higo Damas, like many other businessmen, saw the financial opportunities in pod racing. If pulled off correctly, the Boot Eve Classic circuit would generate record amounts of profits for the venue owner, including those lucrative earnings that would be generated by gambling. As a matter of fact, most racing circuits were funded and powered by gambling. This is what really got people into these races in the first place. It made it even more fun. Surgica Corporation and Losan Industries were famously involved in the Teresian season opener, a very dangerous swoop race that occurred in the lower levels of the city of Taurus. And as you would expect, all of the lower city gangs on Taurus would also bet and involve themselves in these races. It was a great place to make additional revenue for your organization. We also see a lot of gambling being done in the most recent episode of The Bad Batch, where Sid makes a few poor bets with the other racing teams on the world of Safatoma. Now, unfortunately for Garjula the Hutt, the Boot Eve Classic idea would be hijacked by another Hutt named Jabba. He would end up taking over the project, which would be incredibly successful and led him to becoming the most powerful Hutt on the planet. And that's because the races were seen in a very positive light by the inhabitants of Tatooine. In a way, the Hutts use these races the same way that Roman leaders would carry out festivals and gladiator games in order to distract the populace from their woes, and also establish that they were cool rulers and that they would do cool things, like carry out races. And that's part of the reason why races were so popular in Star Wars. This is a galaxy full of suffering, war, poverty, inequality, and just tons of broken dreams. I mean, if you were born in the lower levels of a Euseminopolis like Coruscant or Taurus, there was a good chance that you didn't even believe in the sky, because you'd never seen it. But no matter what species you were, how terrible your situation in life was, almost everyone enjoyed racing. Whether it was just a foot race, or animals racing, or something a bit more advanced and powerful. The adrenaline that one gets from watching people fly around at neck-breaking speeds is universal. There are really no rules to understand. Everyone can get into it very quickly, and the only equipment you really need is some place to drive and something to pilot. And racing in Star Wars wasn't just about speed. Oftentimes, the track was littered with all sorts of incredibly dangerous things, including traps, difficult terrain to maneuver, or even roving bands of Tusken Raiders taking random pot shots at your vehicle as you fly by. The risks that people were taking by racing was extreme, and that just added to the excitement. For instance, during the Boot Eve Classic, only like 6 pod racers made it out of the 20 or so who started that race. And the fans loved the violence and death-defying stunts. If anything, viewers got a sense of catharsis and were able to relieve their own pent-up frustrations and anger when they watched these racers crash into each other at high speeds. The races at Safatoma were especially dangerous because speeders were able to bolt on weapons and defenses onto their vehicles. When one speeder loses control, it sends a flurry of blaster bolts into the crowd and even kills a spectator. No one even flinches, and that's because these racing fans are used to this. No, they expect this kind of violence in their races. Because of the massive amount of money involved in these races and the complete lack of enforcement of the rules, you oftentimes saw drivers even try to kill each other while on the course, which of course just adds to the tension and natural allure of these racers who were immortalized by their victories and seen as giants and heroes by the spectators. And so racing wasn't just entertainment, it was an excellent distraction. It helped people forget just for an hour or so about the horrible ordeals they were going through in life. When you witness heroes like Anakin Skywalker, one of the few humans quick enough to actually pilot a pod racer and stay alive, win the Boot Eve Classic and free himself from servitude, it's quite inspirational. Even if the chances of another slave repeating that same action was pretty close to impossible, it was important that it at least happened once, and other people could kind of cling on to that hope. Large events like the Boot Eve Classic also brought off-world visitors with their credits to Tatooine. A world like Tatooine only had around a population of 200,000, and so the 100,000-seat stadium they built was clearly designed to attract outsiders. And so these pod racing venues could bring a lot of off-world tourism to the local economy. This supports local businesses and the hospitality industry as well. I mean, people really didn't go to Tatooine for any other reason unless they were, I don't know, running away from the law or something like that. You also had some really famous races like the Five Sabers that became almost a brand themselves, and the individuals who won these races became galactic heroes. Then you had more unique venues like the ship Colossus, which was a mobile supertanker fuel depot. It made a good portion of its money by holding races. The large structure had a resident group of pilots known as a squadron, and when they weren't racing each other, making money and honing their pilot skills, they protected the Colossus from pirates and any other hostile force. So racing was universally loved in the Star Wars galaxy, and therefore pretty profitable to get into. And like most things in Star Wars, it was very decentralized. You didn't have some kind of central league controlling everything. Every world had their own vibe, their own rules, and their own type of races. So there you have it, guys. That is my coverage on why racing is important in the Star Wars galaxy. It's far more than a sport. It's an entire culture. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy,